Welcome back to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm Brad Williams. My guest today is Michael Burritt, one of the most influential figures in percussion today. Michael is a celebrated performer, composer, and educator, and for nearly 2 decades he's helped lead the percussion program at the Eastman School of Music, while shaping the lives of countless students along the way. In this conversation, we talk about teaching, studio culture, marimba repertoire, composition, and what it means to build a lasting musical legacy. We also get into the real responsibility of mentorship, the changing landscape for young percussionists, and why sound, phrasing, and musicianship still have to come before anything else. This was a thoughtful one, and I think whether you're a percussionist, an educator, or just someone who cares deeply about music and the people who pass it on, there's a lot here to hold on to. Here's my conversation with Michael Burritt. How much touring and traveling do you do as a clinician, as a performer?
Sometimes there's spells where it's a lot, and then you kind of take but let's see, like this year I've had a couple things. I did a bunch of stuff. February was kind of my Texas month. I played at University of Texas at Austin, did a residency, did a concert there with their students, the percussion like. Did some stuff with them in early February. Played with Ivan Trevino, who's there now, and played with Tom Burritt, who's my cousin and former student as well, which was kind of cool. And played a big Schwantner piece with the students and some other stuff. And then at the end of February, I went to the Dallas area and played at a high school, actually a very good high school group from Forney High School. And played some of my stuff, my home trilogy with them and some solo stuff. And then judged the competition. Then went to East Texas State Commerce, where Brian Zader is, and played a concert there. So you jumped on, then came home. I've been home. Then I'm home for the month of March, which is nice because I got I got to teach at Eastman once in a while, and then, then I head out in April and do a bunch of stuff in Missouri and Atlanta, and actually going to Buffalo, which is not far, but So, it's just April's busier, then it comes back, and then I'm home for May. Then I got a bunch of stuff in July, and it's just kind of goes in and out. So, it depends on the time. It can get really. I got to be careful during the school year that I try not to go out. If I do sometimes for a week at a time, that's fine, but I don't go any longer, and I try to keep it a lot of times to like a weekend. So I'll take off on a Friday, come back either on a Sunday night or a Monday morning, and then they almost don't even know I was gone. I just look, older on Monday morning than I did on or something, so.
My son was a student at LSU when you were there.
Oh, a couple of years ago. Yeah, that wasn't that long ago. That was that might have been like 2023 or something like that, maybe. Or that was great. Oh, really? Cool, man. Nice.
He really took a lot from just that brief amount of time with you, just watching your process. And he still talks about it to this day.
Well, that's nice to hear, man. Well, say hi to him. Did he play with me at all, or was he on any of the stuff that I did with them? Or
he was. I don't know. I don't remember what all he played on that performance, but I know he played on that performance, that concert with you.
Oh, that's nice. Well, say hi to my best to him, man. It's nice. It's nice.
I certainly will.
Always nice to hear. It was fun. Yeah. Great to connect with Brett. He's a great guy and creative, really wonderfully creative person too. Brett is,
Yeah, he certainly is.
Going on, so.
Yeah, I've had Brett. I've had Jake Nissly and Peter Martin on the podcast.
Oh,
and,
man. Oh, yeah.
And all of whom studied with you. And, when you hear those names, what immediately comes to mind?
How old I am? No. No, I'm thinking, man. Well, gosh, I don't know that one thing comes to mind. I mean, they're all distinct people, right? Which is one of the things that I really feel the most proud of, to be honest with you, about my students. Because I've never been a person that wanted to have a program where I was kind of putting out sort of one kind of musician or one kind of percussionist. I've always really enjoyed the idea that we have this studio of people that are, the one thing we have in common is that, or that they have in common, is that there's a level of excellence in their musicianship. There's a curiosity in their manner, and there's a desire to learn from each other and from me a little bit, and so I feel like that is an example of what I love, because you got Jake, who's principal in, San Francisco, who's like an amazing musician and percussionist and such a hard worker too. And also a great drum set player. People don't know that about Jake. He's a really great jazz musician too. So, he just sent me a video the other day. He's working on this Andy Akio concerto, he's kind of playing stuff. So he's, he's got his thing going on, and also just a committed educator. Jake is,
Yes.
Brett, who's I met when he was, I met Brett in Pittsburgh when he was a student at Duquesne, and I went out there because I was invited to play a percussion festival in Pittsburgh once. I don't remember when it was, and they said, would you play a concert with this percussion group that was started at Duquesne called Tempest Fugit, and would you be willing to play some of your music with them on this concert? I said, sure, whatever. It sounds great, And they were great, man. I remember, those guys in that group down, they played a bunch of my stuff. I thought, man, you guys are awesome. Because, I go to colleges and play my pieces with them, which is always fun and great to work with them, like I did in LSU. And, it can be different levels of proficiency, but, I always enjoy the energy and, they always come to the plate and stuff. But, sometimes you get to play with something like that was Fuji back then, and they were like, I walked in and was like, let's go, I was like, they were nice, and you guys are awesome, man. Then we got to know those guys. And then eventually Brett came to Northwestern and worked with him. And he actually wrote some music that I played, and we played together. And, so I think of him and I also like the community that Brett has created at LSU with his students. It's really wonderful. You can tell it's really open, and they're also have a great creative energy about them. And Brett is a guy that, embraces that and exemplifies that, So he's also a great player unto himself. He also plays very talented musician as a performer. I don't think he gives himself enough credit in that regard, in my opinion.
I agree.
So I think of that with him, and I think of Peter is, Peter's like one of those marimba monsters, man. Peter was always a good guy that was shedding. He just worked and kind of quiet. Peter never, Brett and Jake are a little more, different people, but they were more, they weren't like Peter's just to himself more, kind of quiet, does his thing really well, and I met him when he was at Rutgers as a student in a master class. He played for me once. I remember that. And he was there, and then he came to Northwestern, did 2 degrees there, and master's and doctorate. And I feel like he did his doctorate with me, and then he had to finish something when I was already gone. He did his coursework when I was there, and then split. I forget exactly the way it laid out, but anyways, and look what he's done with Third Coast Percussion. They played a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago as a commission from Zildjian. It was a big piece that I called Since Time Began. It was a 4-movement piece that celebrated their 400th anniversary. And Third Coast premiered it at PASIC in, I think that was 23. And man, they played it great. But Peter, the way I opened the piece was with this like marimba solo. It starts with this like, which was supposed to represent the first of the brothers that formed the company. And then, then another marimba came in. It was sort of like, there's a long story. I don't want to go into all this about bore you with my, formulaic opening, but Peter played that solo. So when I think of Peter right now, the first thing I think about is just like how beautifully he played that opening solo. Just from a musical perspective, it was perfect. It was exactly how I wanted it done. So,
it's funny. I don't know, and I'm sure you know this, but to hear them talk about the impact that you've had on them as educators, as performers, as composers. I mean, I just spoke with Jake, his episode, as we're recording this, his episode hasn't even released yet. And I think it was last week or the week before. I mean, he looked at me and he said, I could probably sit and talk to you for this entire episode about the impact that Michael had on my life.
That makes me want to cry, man. I mean, that's no.
And he was emotional about it. I mean, it was beautiful.
Don't get me going. Dude, y'all be crying on the podcast. You can't do that. No, but that's like, first of all, I think that's, I don't even know what the word is for that. There's sometimes things that can happen in your life. You can't verbalize how you feel about it. But I think that kind of thing, him saying that. And I just read some letters that my students had written about me for something I can't go into right now. It's a positive thing, but I was just reading, I was like yesterday and I was just like, geez, and I think there's two things about it. One, that it hits me. And I've always understood this in a certain way, but I understand it more now. That your impact on your students and the importance you are in their life. I guess what I want to say is that the role you play and the responsibility of that role is not insignificant. I think on a couple levels, probably more than just two. I hate to, it's hard to say, but obviously as a teacher, you're thinking in the practical level of like trying to help them grow in their skills, musically, technically. That. But I also feel like your role, especially in what we do, is part of also human, and trying to help them, especially when they're undergrads, help them grow as people like that, have a sense of character and humility and all those kinds of things, and trying to be an example of that while pushing them to be good and while also pushing them to have confidence. Those are balances, right? So anyways, I just think about that. It just moves me, it makes me incredibly happy and thankful. And I mean, even for example, when I was sick a couple of years ago and, I didn't really make any big posts about anything. I'm struggling with this. I'll be okay. But I just told a few people that needed to know because I had to cancel some things. And I also, I had responsibilities that I had to, and so found out, right? So that's fine. And, a word like that it goes through your students quickly. And the support and the texts and the love from them was, so profound, man, So I hear that from Jake. And here's the thing that they don't understand. And I think it's hard for them to know, but their impact on my life has been probably more than mine on theirs. It really has, it really has. I wrote something in a program note a couple of years ago, when I was writing the program note for that piece that Third Coast performed I was mentioning. And I think the last sentence of that program note was like, when your students become your heroes, you're doing something right. What I'm saying to you? And that's kind of the way I feel about it with these guys, but Jake he's a great person and he's an incredible player, man. God, the guy can play anything and the integrity in it. And I just also love it. I love it because I relate to it. He has such a great intensity to it. He can bring it, man. But he is, he comes into his classes here, man. The skill of his playing, of course, on the snare drum is exquisite and beautiful and music. But like when he picks up the tambourine and stuff, it's just like, wow, that's the next level. You hear that and you go, geez, so yeah,
Well, and I think that, and I'm thinking about Brett with my son, Skylar. I mean, they still stay in touch. Skylar's moved on. He lives in Austin. He's not doing anything with music now, but those seeds that are planted with mentors like you and with Brett, I mean, it goes beyond music. He looks up to him as like another father figure.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
I always say, like, when I do this, I kind of talk about this when I'm recruiting, which is actually, this is recruiting season coming in. We haven't opened up the class yet, but, especially when you're talking to parents about what it means to come to music school to study, right? I always say that what we do as applied teachers, as performance teachers, is sort of like one of the last bastions of apprenticeship that we see in the country, or in the world, maybe, like, because it's a one-on-one thing, when you're
right
working with people in a very special way. If you go to school and study engineering or English or whatever you do, you may get fortunate enough to meet a few professors or one professor that you become connected with in a way that's more unique. But that's, I don't think, even given or necessarily common. Can happen, but not like this. I see them every week, whether it be in lessons or studio class, percussion ensemble, walk in and watch them rehearsing with orchestra. You're always, and it's a very cool thing. It's a really beautiful thing, actually. So whenever, so.
How was it back? So how long have you been back at Eastman? How long have you been there?
Okay, I got here in the fall of 2008. I think this is my 19th year, or 19th.
Okay.
I know, it goes fast, right? Jeez. And the wild thing is, this is the place I've been the longest now. So.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? And you were, and you were there. You were there as a student, right?
Oh yeah, in the 80s. Yeah. So they would come back. Yeah.
How does it feel coming back and carrying that legacy forward? I mean, it has to be an incredible opportunity, yet responsibility, I would imagine.
Yeah, I never felt like any weight of that, in a way, not in a way that, I mean, I always feel a responsibility for anywhere I am, to be honest with you. Like when I got to Northwestern, I felt a responsibility, to like do a great job and help those students who were really driven, just like they are at Eastman, to succeed, and, all those things. I think more than feeling the weight of it, I felt excited and honored. So those emotions and those feelings outweighed anything of pressure. Does that make sense? And so,
yeah, absolutely.
What I wanted to do, I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I know, let's go, let's, I was like, so I just felt like that was fun. And actually, one of the most fun moments of my life was when I got to start here, because I think I knew myself even better then. Because when I got the Northwestern job, which was a huge gig, I mean, it was like, wow, I was like 32 years old, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
And, it was a great opportunity to actually mold that program, see if I could do it, because I had done this thing at Kent State, which was cool. It was fun. I cut my teeth there and learned a lot and felt incredibly grateful to be there and had so much fun there. But then the Northwestern gig felt like a heavier weight to me, because I was younger and I don't think I had the same confidence. Right. It's like a big step. Right.
Right.
And I think I learned there that it doesn't matter where you are. It's that you love what you're doing and you need to lean into that. And it's not really about the prestige of where you are. It's about getting to do it, getting to do the thing. And when I went to Eastman, I felt like I knew who I was and they wanted me. So let's go. And it also felt cool. And then John Beck was around. He and I hung out all the time. We still do. That was the coolest thing in the world. Like, wow. And, I remember the day he gave me the key to his studio, it was like, I studied, like, here you go. Here's the key. Actually, the funny thing was, he goes, here's the key to your studio. And then he goes, and here's the key to everyone else's. He was like, but, and he and I, we are incredibly, he's like a second dad to me. He and I are connected all the time. We did a concert a week and a half ago and he was there, and, he's, but, so it's been an honor to follow him, and also just a real, blessing to like become a part of his life and us to be and our families to be connected more, and, to feel like JB's like, a really, a friend, a mentor, a really important person in my life, and that we have this connection. That's been great, but it's been fun. And, at Eastman too, there's a bunch of people, that I work with. I just had, hung out the other night with a really great friend of mine, Mark Scatterday, who's the director of the wind ensemble. He went to Eastman. Now he went, so like, and others, like, not everyone, but, there's a bunch of us that went there and now we're there. And it's just like, this is, he's the director of the Eastman Wind Ensemble, which has a huge legacy, kind of like the percussion legacy. It's like, wow, but it's cool. It's like, hey, we're talking about, like, the cool thing is we're doing a big, I think not exactly, it's a year and a half. We're doing this big celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Eastman Wind Ensemble. Wow. And I'm going to do a concerto with the Wind Ensemble in Carnegie Hall. So, it's just fun, man. It's an honor and it's fun and it's fun to work with some incredible students, I used to be, I know I'm probably talking too much, or just yell at me, but I think about this more recently. I am still, but especially when I was a kid in the 70s, I was a real, like, big Dallas Cowboys fan when I was a kid in the 70s, and that's when, like, these names may not resonate with you, but like Tom Landry was the coach, historical coach, and then Roger Staubach was the quarterback. Mm-hmm. Great Tony Dorsett got on the team later, but there was a lot of great players on that team. But I used to watch them as a kid. I grew up in the 70s. I was like a kid, like, a little kid watching this. I used to like their helmets at first. I was like, but the cool thing about it, and when I watch back now, because you can go on YouTube and watch, like, these old games. And Landry was always so cool, like, on the sidelines. But the team was always so ready, and like they were like professionals. I mean, they just were out there prepared, talent. Let's go. And I feel like that's what I get to be. I get to be Tom Landry at Eastman. I massive, like, stable of incredibly talented people that I get to, like, move around and help and push and this and that, and then watch them become these things like the Peter Martins, the Dick Nisslys, and the Brett Dietzes. It's cool. I don't wear a fedora, like, I don't look good in hats, but
well, and I think that, like with any successful team, sports team, any type of team, culture in a studio is paramount. And I mean, talent is obviously important, but culture and just being a healthy, safe environment for the students is so important.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day, or I think about this a lot now, but when I sort of knew that was important, I think I just instinctively always wanted that, without thinking about it as like a mandate. Does that make sense? When I was younger, like, I wanted a culture of a sense of esprit de corps from the students. Like, hey, we're proud to be a part of this kind of thing. I think, I was really lucky. So, my dad was my band director.
Really?
Yeah, it was cool. I grew up in Syracuse, actually not far from here. And it was a really great program they had. The high school is called West Genesee High School. It's in Camillus, New York. It's like it's a western suburb of Syracuse. But anyways, I grew up there, and it was at the time, I think it still is a good program. It was a really big program, and actually nationally. Like, when I got to be a young professional, I'd go places and they'd go, "Are you Bruce Burritt's son?" I'm like, "Oh my God!" So getting this, like, I used to get it when I was a kid. I go to solo and ensemble contests. "Oh, you're Bruce Burritt's son?" "Yes, I am." So, but he had a great program there. The marching band was winning championships every year and all this stuff. And the concert band played at Midwest, and we used to have guest artists coming in to perform. We had, Frederick Fennell, the conductor of the Eastman Wind Ensemble, the guy who started it, came in to conduct, and Huntsberger, who was the kid that followed him, conducting. Warren Benson would come in. Karel Husa, who wrote music for Prague. We had all these people come in, and jazz people too. So it was cool, and I grew up in a very spoiled environment, both creatively, but also in terms of, like, understanding excellence and work ethic, and also understanding culture in a way. Like, I think we had a culture there that I was just a part of in this thing. And I talk about Eastman being like a musical incubator, and I think that I was in a musical incubator when I was a young guy, and I had great teachers around me that helped me in that way. And then I think so some of that followed me, and instinctively that became something that I realized was important. And I think today, there's so much more coming at the students, social media, and we talk about that a lot, and everything, right? It's easy to be insecure, because I think things like social media, which I think is, I use it myself in a way to, like, show what's happening at Eastman, or do things, or I try to use it in a fun way. Like, hey, check this out. This is fun. And my students love it. They put them online, or I'll handpress them this, check it out. Kind of fun, or as a way of just communicating to our community. But I think it can also be something either unintentionally or otherwise that can make you feel bad, like whether it be about looks or whatever, all these things. I don't want to go into all this now, but so I think it's really important for the students, even more so now, to be in a culture, if you can help that, where they can feel safe, they can feel valued, they can feel seen, they understand that they are unique and that they have gifts that are their own, and that other people have gifts that are their own. And sometimes those gifts can seem like, man, I wish I had that gift. Yeah, but you have this one. And you can learn from that gift, and they're going to learn from yours. And that's why you're here. Right?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that those are important paradigms to bring home on a regular basis and to exemplify the best you can, because I think if you go through life with that mindset, you're going to be okay. You're going to do well. I always say you got to learn to be comfortable in your own shoes, and if you are, then you can be comfortable with other people in their shoes, and then, you know what I mean? It's just how it works, and it's funny. I don't think it's not that hard. Once you understand it and once you say, hey, I can do this and I can't do that, but I'm doing this, and boy, I can learn from this and I get to play with these people. And so, I mean, that's, I think now more than ever, that's really, really important, because it can be a really safe place for people to be when other places don't feel as safe. And then you learn more that way. You can feel free to learn. You can feel like excited to learn, all those kind of things.
Have you seen any shifts in percussion students of 2026 versus 20 years ago, with anything from social media to having every recording under the sun available in a few clicks? Have you seen any shifts in that?
In what way? Shifts in? Can you be a little more specific?
Yeah.
Like, you mean
have you
their
seen
playing level or in their? What do you mean?
Playing level? I mean, and I've talked with a lot of musicians on here that are around my age that came up at a time where it was an active exercise to go and find recordings of pieces you were learning instead of having the ability to find them at a moment's notice on your phone.
Right.
And I think that there's some value in that active exercise of seeking that information.
Yeah, the investigative process was more, when I was a kid, it was records, right? I mean, it was like, they had simply, all right, we have a really massive library. Eastman's the biggest music collection in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a big scene. And back when I was there, you had to go check out the record, listen to it. You couldn't, there was no internet. I mean, I think, sure. I don't know. I mean, I would never say that. Certainly, I don't think my students are lazy. They're very motivated, driven, curious people. I think it can be distracting, maybe, but I guess to answer your question, like difference. And so 20 years ago, so I'm thinking, certainly there was less internet. I think the Vic Firth stuff was just starting to open up a little bit in 2006. I'm thinking exactly 20 years ago, right? That was right before I started Eastman, a couple of years. So I wasn't as aware of it, my students are they're the ones that like in 2010, they're like, you got to start making videos, man. So I'm like, why? Like, because you need to. Now, of course, I'm like, I love them. We do it all the time. We have some scheduled for the May. We're film and do, that's a whole nother conversation. I think they're very valuable, and it's a very cool, almost like its own art medium to itself. But, so I think it can be a great resource for them, but can also be a distraction. And I mean it this way, not so much they're going to go down a rabbit hole of waste of time in terms of, I'm going to start watching videos about whatever, tornadoes in the Amazon or something. I don't even know if they have tornadoes in the Amazon, but I think it can be, because you could get locked into listening to a recording of something. If you don't have the right kind of skills to discern, that could really not be a great, either version of this particular piece, or this is not really a great piece, I don't think. So let's not worry about that, because you can get younger kids, I want to play this. I know you want to play that, but we're going to wait and do this. So it can be that way sometimes, like, or they hear, I don't think it's ever been different than this, but it's more prevalent now. Like they'll hear someone playing, whether it be the, velocities or something, and they'll say, hey, can I play this tomorrow? No, we're going to do this. There's some of that, so I think that's changed, but I do think it has, being able to see high levels of artistry at a moment's notice pushes the art, pushes the level, right? And makes them want to go further. So I definitely see, and this has been going on for a long time, the level of the freshmen now coming in, what they're playing. And, sometimes they're playing hard music they shouldn't play, like I just mentioned. And I'll give examples of it, but, you can have, I had a freshman this year playing con variations, auditioning from high school. It's like, really? Which is great. And he did okay. It's, I don't know that I would, I don't know that I think that, you need to be doing that when you're 18, but maybe it just depends on a special person. I remember when Austin Keck, Austin Keck, one of my students.
No, I don't.
There's a lot of great music. He's a wonderful musician, player, and composer. He's online a lot on Instagram. You should follow him. He's got some great stuff. He played Velocities when he was a freshman, but he played it great. So it's like, okay, it's fine. So that's been happening. Or, I was a senior in high school. I was playing Y'all Left of the Rain in 1980. And everyone thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I thought it was cool. Like, check it out. I can play Y'all. So, and at the time that was like, that was like, okay, you can play you can control the technique. You do this stuff, no matter what the sophistication of the content was, you could do these things. And now it's gone beyond, like, can you do these things? Here's repertoire that uses these skills in a much more sophisticated manner, so all that has grown for sure. I think sometimes maybe what I don't like that I see is many times I don't think students have been taken through like a pedagogy as their young student. And I feel like I was lucky to have that. Like I had a teacher when I was quite young, a guy named George Ward from Syracuse, who I remember being a kid, man, going into his studio on whatever it was, Thursday night or something. And I go in and I play my stick control exercises. And I remember working on these 2 volumes of books called Here's the Drum, Volume 1 and 2. All right. And they were by Emil Scholey, who was a percussionist. I didn't know this at the time, but he was a percussionist in the Cleveland Orchestra, wrote these books. Here's the Drum, Volume 1 and 2. And I used to count out loud. 1, 2, and 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I used to hate it. Like I want to count out loud. So, whatever, 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 1. But it was a great habit. It was a great thing that I learned. And control, and we did Wilcoxon and all this stuff, reading, 2 mallets, it was a very disciplined pedagogy. We went from that into, I don't even know what we did next. Doesn't matter. But, I use that now. I don't use Here's the Drum, but I use stick control all the time. I use Wilcoxon, I use Pratt, whatever. But they don't come in. They come in having played. I played this solo because it was the Allstate solo. I played this because this. Now, they. In a way, I feel like sometimes, and I don't want to criticize the teaching of, the high school and junior high teaching, because it's a hard job, and they have to keep the students motivated and whatever. So, and I'm not saying this happens, but I feel like what's missing. So when I get them and I say, no, we're going to do stick control, we're going to do this, and I slow them down and I bring them back, and we're going to refine this, and we're going to learn develop our really important musical skills, like our time and our sense of phrasing and our understanding of sound and how movement affects these things that are more mature things to teach, but you can teach them when they're younger, even though they don't really understand them in the same way that you can when you get older. I think some of that's missing a little bit sometimes, like or at least a lot of times. My freshmen that come in haven't had that same kind of like, here's a pedagogy that you're going through. Some have, I know that like Mark Wessels has stuff that he wrote that some of the Texas schools use. I don't really know it that well, but there's sort of a program they go through when they're very young through his books and things like that. And so I'm sure they work well. But I think that's an important thing. And I think most traditional courses of study for violin or clarinet or flute or whatever, there is a pedagogy that those instruments go through. And they learn, and then they move into repertoire. I think the other thing, if I can answer this question a little further, you're thinking
certainly,
because give the longest answers on the podcast.
I love it.
But the other thing is, I was saying, I think one thing that's hard is, and I know people have tried to address this, that we go back to the yellow after the rain analogy or example, and different kind of pieces that we use for students. I think it's hard to find. There's not enough pieces. Or there's a kind of there's some more, and there's things, but there's a big jump from, like, there's a big jump to con variations or velocities, or you could say mirage or whatever. We can go on with those pieces, the bigger keyboard pieces I'm talking specifically now, because those can be some of the most challenging stuff that we learn, right? There's obviously some multi-percussion pieces that are also very challenging. So it's hard because, we go from playing, let's say you're in high school and you play the Second Mexican Dance, which is a great piece. I love it. It's one of my favorite pieces of all. Mm-hmm. And we study that, which is, 3.5 minute movement, or I don't know how long that is. Doesn't matter. Or someone, they learn a Samut rotation, or they learn one of my preludes or October Night or whatever they play. And then all of a sudden they want to play Variations on Lost Love, or they want to play, something much bigger, or the Klatzau Dances of Earth and Fire, or whatever it is. That's a big jump. Even time from it's another step, right? And harder to learn, and a longer time to have to concentrate. Like if you're playing the Second Mexican Dance, you have to concentrate for 3 minutes or whatever it is, right? Now you got to you play in con variations. You got to concentrate for 9 minutes. It's like, right. You got to really concentrate. So that's a muscle that we need to find a way as pedagogues to find more music that can help us grow that muscle with our students, so that when they get to those pieces, because pianists, they start learning Chopin and stuff when they're younger, and then they get into bigger pieces, and you get to a Beethoven sonata, which is 40 minutes, they've sort of got themselves to a place where they understand what that. I'm not saying it's any easier for them at all, because that's, but I think that's something about our pedagogy, learning how to, and as percussionists, we sit back in the section and we wait, and then we play, and then we wait, and then we play. We're not playing all the time, right? So that's part of what we do too. So having to and sometimes we don't stay in the game, right? We're hanging out. Okay, I'll get up, I got to play this note. So having to stay in the game for a whole solo piece is something I think that also needs to be, we need to think about that in our pedagogy. Like, how can we help do this? I think Nancy Zelsman tried to address that with her intermediate solos that she had commissioned and beautifully put together on those volumes. It was great. All those things are, all of us, I try to write things that help with that, and so do others. Then I think some have successfully, but we need more.
when you have students come to you, is the first step in the process, or are you trying to develop a particular sound from them? Is that kind of find their voice? Is that kind of the first objective?
Undergrads are different than grads, right? So, but let's take an undergrad, for example. I mean, I'm trying to help them understand a good sound, making sure that they do, right? And what that sound is on the various instruments, and, how moving and how we leverage the weight of our implements, whether it be sticks or mallets or gong mallets or whatever it is, or cymbals, is how that works to create the sounds, and to develop your ear. I always tell them you have to have it. You can't just understand it. You have to have it here, because once you have it here, then you will demand that this finds a way to get there. Does that make sense? So, yeah. So through showing them and getting that, and also the rest of the studio doing it, they hear it. So then your ear starts to demand it of you. And so I think that's one of my biggest goals, is to get their ears to demand a higher level of excellence or a higher level of artistry from themselves, whether it be, first of all, the sounds they're getting, the consistency of their time, and so on, the way they phrase and color lines and all those things. You want their ears to start to hear that. And even though and sometimes you don't really, your ear starts to demand you to do it, right?
Right.
And the easiest example of that is when you're younger and you're playing rudimental snare drum solos, and your ear, you want to hear that, that cleanness of sound from your rolls and things like that. All those things you learn to get there because you're hearing it and you want that. And then your hands, and sometimes they find a way to get there that isn't healthy. You have to work. Some students are, compensating and using tension and doing things they shouldn't do because their ears are trying to get them to that place of playing this cleanly and whatever, getting them to relax and learn to do it that way while still letting their ear demand that they get there, So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking about, you talking about sitting in the back of the section, and that the challenge of sitting there for 15 minutes and then having to stand up and play one note and it be the best sounding note you've ever played. I mean, that's right. Not easy.
Yeah. It's that who said it, like percussionist, 90% panic, 10% playing, or something. But it's true, and I think that's an amazing skill, right? I mean, I could play a whole recital, and my friend Mark Hodges, who's a principal percussionist in Buffalo Phil, a wonderful musician, he'll say, "Man, I don't know how you do all that, my God." I'll think, "Man, I don't know how you sit back there and wait, playing like the cymbal crash." I mean, that's a skill too. That's a huge skill, right? And also not just the sound, like you say, but the placement of the note and all those things. The maturity of those things is huge, So, it's like it's a different thing, right? It's we're asked to do a lot of different kinds of things as percussionists, which is cool, but it's also very demanding in a unique way.
Yeah. Do you think the current state of like marimba repertoire that's being composed today, is it leaning more technical than it was before, or is it how do you feel about the current state of all that, the music?
Well, I don't know that I have. I mean, I guess it's a good question. It's I think like probably always there's like some really great music that puts music first, and then there's other pieces that are written that doesn't. And I certainly don't want to on a podcast say, for example, here's a piece that I think, I don't even know that I have in the front of my mind now something that I think I wouldn't, but I think there's, I think the great thing for us is that, and compare, like I do this talk on composition, and I put together, and I start, before I actually talk about how I put together a piece or how I come up with ideas or develop ideas, I talk about why I compose, and I go back to the history of our literature, and I talk about when I graduated from Eastman. So when I left Eastman, it was 85. So I did my master's so I did my bachelor's in 84, and I stayed for a year extra. I was going to stay for 2, but then I wanted to get married. So I stayed for a year in the summer. I did my master's in 1 year, and not that was probably, it was fine, but it would, I could have certainly benefited from another year, but I was anxious to go, and I got a job luckily, but I left Eastman in 85, and I thought, let's make a list, and I show them what was written by what I had to choose from at that time. But I go back earlier in the 20th century and start with what Musser did and Green. And then you get into the 40s and 50s when Creston was written, and and so on, and the Kirk Concerto and some of the stuff in the 60s, the Olodina Toccata. And then eventually you got the Japanese pieces in the late 60s, early 70s. And anyway, so I show slides for every decade, and each slide has a group of pieces, and as decades grow, it gets a little bigger. And then you get into the 80s, especially after 85, and it goes like from beep, 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 boom, boom, boom. And you go on and you see it, not just by looking at the pieces, but just the visual of the amount of music that after the mid 80s started being written for us. Okay. And that's coinciding with the kind of composers that were writing for us. So like, for example, the Japanese pieces to me are some of our very first really important art pieces that were written for us. Mirage by Tsuyoshi and Time from Rimba by Miki and Miyoshi's Torch 3. And those pieces are important pieces that are like written for Abe, that were like kind of like sophisticated music that we had to learn. It's interesting, right? You could say the Fischinger Suite is also an interesting piece. I think that's late 50s. I should know that, but it's a cool piece, but that's an earlier, Anyways, then it goes on, but then mid 80s, all of a sudden you get like Schwantner and writing for us, and even the Merlin piece by Andrew Thomas, who's not necessarily a huge composer outside of what we know, but an important piece. Klatzow, that writing music for us, and then eventually people like Vinyao, and it goes on, right? We have Paul Lansky and David Lang wrote a piece, and European composers that are writing important music for us, whether it be Michael Jurel or Bruno Mantovani, and I'm just throwing out names here, but and I'm sure I'm missing things in between. And there's other pieces that are written by composers that aren't necessarily like Pulitzer Prize winning composers, but are also beautiful pieces, And so we're being seen now. So we have more music written by composers that are not just writing for percussion. They're just musicians that, okay, let's write. They also write great music for orchestra or opera or whatever. And they're writing for us, and whether it be in chamber and in solo music, which is great. So it's blown up. So I think that's the really important thing that I see that's really helping us a lot, and I think, that's helping us grow as musicians. Right. And I think, do we need to make more technical improvements on what we do? I guess that could always be something, but I think I think in many ways, the facility of what we do is much more like when I was a kid, the Stevens thing was a new thing. I could tell a funny story about that. If we have time, I can tell that how I learned it, but that was a big thing. So when I got to college and I was playing Stevens technique in 1980, a lot of people weren't doing it yet, especially the teachers above me, because they didn't learn that. I mean, that was like a late 70s thing that Lee put together. And I just, whatever, doing it. I had good snare drum technique, and somehow my facile hands could learn to do that well. But now that's not a big deal. That's like, okay, so we do that, right? When I was a kid, it was like, wow, you can do that. Now it's like, okay, you should do that, right? And it's like, so you do that. So now what matters is the music, which is what should matter, right? And so I think there's probably both sides of that, like good music and bad music being written. I don't know how you define that. Like, it's not for me to say, but I can tell you that I make my students go through what I consider there's sort of a canon of music that I like to see my studio always playing. And I use the analogy that if you're an English major, if you go to school, you're going to study liberal arts or English. My daughter was. So you're going to study Shakespeare, and you're going to study, you're going to read Steinbeck, and you're going to read Hemingway, and so on, because that's important stuff to read. You may not read every important author. No one's going to play every important piece of repertoire, whether it be Xenakis or Miyoshi or Schwantner or Klatzow or whatever, Vinyao. You're going to have a mix of some of those. You need to learn. And you're going to hear other people playing the other ones, so you learn about them, and that's really important for us. I think, and now we have more of that. So there is a canon of repertoire that I think is really important for us to use as the spine of our curriculums, because that does teach a level of a paradigm of musicianship that I think is important. And then you can go from there, and hopefully you're training your students to have a musical filter that will help them decide what they think is music that they want to be both performing and sharing with others. Has a foundation to it that has meaning.
Yeah. When you compose for marimba, do you do you come at it first from a performance standpoint or as a compositional standpoint? Or does it vary?
Well, I think when I was younger, I was, doing a lot of I didn't use finale. Matter of fact, when I first started writing, there wasn't finale. You know what I'm saying? When I was, I was writing, I think October Night. It's the first piece I wrote from marimba. I don't know when finale wasn't started going, so I don't want to say this and be definitive about that, but I wasn't aware of it. I didn't have friends that were using it. All my composer friends that I was working with, like the guys that taught at Kent State with me, where everything was by hand. So I did a lot of work at the instrument, and you can see that in the way it works. It works, it kind of works. But I would always go back to the music that I had learned as a blueprint for how pieces are developed, whether it be Gordon Stout's music, who was my teacher when I was younger, or even I remember using Time from marimba. That's a great piece to look at development and how motives are used and, things like that. So, October Night was at the marimba, but then a piece called Four Movements from Marimba, which isn't played as much anymore. I don't know if it should be or not, but it was a more challenging piece. I would write at the marimba, but I would go back and do this because I'm not really a pianist, even though I have a keyboard here that I use with all my mails. I have my mail sitting on my computer right now that I'm going to, but on my keyboard. But anyways, that's my tool, right? And Stout says that too. The marimba is my tool, But I would go back and forth, and but more I've composed now. I do a lot of stuff at the piano when I get ideas, and I kind of know how it's going to work. Whether it be stuff for ensemble, because I write a lot from marimba within the ensemble, right? So, or not. But sometimes I can write pieces at the instrument, and so I think now I'm less at the marimba, but sometimes, like a piece I wrote. I guess it was more than 10 years ago now. White Pines, which gets played a lot. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
I just actually answered an email about that before I got on with you. It's part of a bigger piece that I wrote for Nexus, right? So, but when I started writing that piece, that movement of it, I wanted the marimba to sound like a guitar. So I went up there and started fooling around with some ideas. And then I got into this idea of how a pedal tone works and how I would move. I descend from the pedal, then I would ascend from the pedal, then I would move in both directions away from it. But I did it at the keyboard using my ears and then, so I was thinking compositionally while I was there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But also felt good to play it. This is fun. This is going to go, so, but the first movement of that piece is called Home Trilogy. So the first movement is called Painted Hills. That wasn't written at the marimba at all. It was all written here. Same with the last movement. So, and same with the other sections of White Pines, just the other middle sections of that piece are all written on the keyboard. When I say keyboard, I mean the piano or it's like an electronic keyboard that feed into my system, so I don't know if that means I'm thinking compositionally or what, but, but I'm not a guy that's thinking, okay, I'm going to use, and I say this word, I don't mean it in a bad way, but a formulaic kind of thing. It's just not I'm more of an intuitive person that way. So here's an idea. Let's see how I take it. But I think when you look at how you develop it, a lot of your instincts as a musician you can see how you're developing an idea by, you may invert it, you may augment it, you may do all these things that happen sometimes instinctively or sometimes intentionally. But sometimes your musical instincts and how you develop can be traced back to, okay, this is the theme, but now I've sort of inverted it this way, or now I've augmented it, or this is why this comes from here. Right. And I think that's probably true for Bartok and others who are great composers.
Yeah.
So.
when non-percussionists or non-marimba soloists who are composers write for the instrument, are there things that you think bring a fresh approach to the instrument versus maybe things that they don't understand because they don't play the instrument? Where are the pros and cons of them not being marimba performers?
I think that's always good because they're not. I think they're thinking, like we said, music first. Like they have an idea. Mm-hmm. They always, I think, many of them that come to it have an idea of what the instrument sounds like and what it does well, and they have an idea of how they want to manipulate those things. I'm
just thinking about you writing a piece.
Right.
You would understand some of the technical requirements of that maybe someone else wouldn't understand.
Right. And like I've worked very closely with Alejandro Viñao, I love him. I think he's a brilliant composer and one of the most important composers for our instrument of the last 25 years. I guess I'm saying that right. Probably. Yeah. Anyways, doesn't matter. Probably. Mm-hmm. So, or more, 30, but, and he has a deep understanding of it, but his understanding has grown, but he's the kind of guy that when we work together, and we actually were now working on something new that we're trying to get going, but, he writes really challenging music, but he understands how the marimba works and he wants to understand that. So he'll write things for me. And I remember when he was writing his piece he wrote for me, that's called, I say this in my, it's called Burritt Variations, which, it wasn't my idea to call it that, just so we're clear. I want to not say, I didn't want him to call it that, but then he insisted. But now I kind of like it actually. But anyways, but this solo piece he wrote for me back in 2012, and he would send me things and I would say, I can't do this really. And he would say, you mean your left hand can't escape fast enough to do this? Or he'd use things like that. I said, no. And we'd talk. And, so I think composers that are, most really great composers like to work with you and say, okay, Joseph Schrontner, I do a piece of his called, actually the setup for that piece is still kind of here. You can see all those instruments there.
Oh yeah.
And crotales. I use them. Anyways, a piece called Fast Forward that I play from time to time. Now it's like, he calls it a chamber concerto. It's like solo percussion with 4 percussion, piano, and bass. Cool piece. Super fun. And, when he was writing that and he sent it to me, then I write him back and say, hey, I can't do this. I can do this. Or how about if we use this instead of this? And yeah, I like that. Let's do that. Sure. I'll edit that. Don't worry about that. Let's move this. Let's move that over there. And you can do, so even he's obviously an incredibly well-established composer. He's in his 80s now and still very vital as a creative person. But, he was very open and interested in helping the performer so that the piece could be played well and would be a piece that the performer could really lean into and play well, So, I think, but it comes to it with a way it was not up necessarily, all of them, not necessarily always understanding, they're going to write this because they want this sound, they want this color, they want this collection of notes. And then here, and I think that's good, right?
Absolutely.
The Druckmann, that piece, the Reflections of the Nature of Water, that's another piece. That's a staple, fantastic piece. Maybe the best piece written for the marimba ever. I mean, that's a pretty provocative statement that if people hear this podcast, I'll probably get emails about. But it's beautifully idiomatic, in a way that part of why it works so beautifully. I mean, it's not saying it's so idiomatic that so you can put your feet up and play the piece. It's got challenges to it in terms of getting around the instrument and he understands the acoustics of the instruments, the way he uses the acoustics of the marimba, the way he writes that way. The way he writes sequences and understands. So he really, but it's beautiful. So his understanding of the idiomatics, probably because of his son, maybe, right? Daniel Druckmann. Mm-hmm. And just because he's a great composer, he understands. He studied it. He got to know it. Part of his understanding of how it works idiomatically is why the piece is so successful, because he understands how to make the marimba work. And if you got Chopin, Rachmaninoff, those guys all play the piano, right? I mean, so their list, they're playing the piano when they're writing, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. They understand how it works. They wrote, but they understood what's going to sound good. And that's also cool, right? But they're, great composers that happen to be pianists or pianists that happen to be composers. I don't know how that works, but
yeah.
Did I answer the question at all? I probably just...
You absolutely did. Yeah. You did. Yeah. You've sparked my curiosity. You alluded to this story about Lee Stevens earlier. I'd love to hear what.
My story about that. It's a funny story. I was in high school, and my teacher, a guy named Herbert Flower, great guy. He was the principal percussionist in the Syracuse Symphony. And I studied with him, and really good musician. And he was assigned me. Do you know the piece by William Kraft called French Suite? Great.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a cool piece.
I remember doing English Suite and French Suite. Yeah,
right, exactly. Morris dance, great stuff that William Kraft wrote, kind of educational multi-pieces that were based on, like Baroque dance suites, right? So I was learning a couple movements of the French Suite, and the third movement of that is called sarabande, and that requires 4 mallets. Okay, and you're playing on like bongos and toms with some cymbals and stuff. It's a very creative piece, and it uses the sarabande rhythm, dick, bum, bum, whatever. So he showed me here, this is like a Saturday afternoon. He says, here, it's like a 10th grader or something. He's like, here you go. We're going to play this piece and you're going to learn this. And here's how you hold the sticks. And I think he showed me like a crossed grip or something. I don't remember what it was. And, learn this and, bring it next week or bring it in 2 weeks, whatever it was. Let's get this. We're going to learn it for solo and ensemble contest. Okay. So I go home and, it's not like I went home, and like that day set drums up and like got ready. It was probably 2 or 3 days later. I should look at this now. I had other things. I had other priorities in my life. I had friends and so like, I got to practice. So it wasn't like I was, but I love, so I set it up, got ready to go, and I remember thinking, how am I supposed to hold the sticks? And there was no picture, there was no YouTube or Google or anything else, and I was like trying to figure it out, trying to remember. What did he say? It was like, did it go like this? That kind of thing. And that weekend, Lee Stevens gave a clinic near kind of about an hour from my house at a high school. I didn't know who he was. My dad's like, with the band director, you're going to go, I want you to go see this marimba clinic. And I said, no, I don't want to go. I have other things, this girlfriend of mine, I want to do this thing, whatever it was. And he was like, no, you're going to go. You got to go to do this. I'm like, Dad, I don't really play the marimba. I have to, but I'm a drummer, because that's how I felt about it. It was like, you make me play the marimba. At the time, it was like I have to mow the lawn and I have to play the marimba, and I want to play the drums. So it was like, So I said, okay. He said, I think he called him Lee Harvey Stevens. Is what he called him. It's great, right? So go see Lee Harvey, this guy. He's supposed to be really good. He's from Eastman. I knew what Eastman was. I said, okay, whatever. Yeah. So I go to this thing and he gives a clinic. It was Cortland High School. It was a band room. I remember like those old band rooms where they're like built-in tiers, like risers that are actually built into the band. I was sitting in the back because it was too cool to sit near the front. I was in the back and I'm like, okay, my dad, I'm going to be here. I'll listen to this, but whatever. So Lee's up there walking around. He starts talking. He says, okay, I'm going to show you my grip, which I didn't understand at the time in any way that this was something unique to what had been happening prior to it or anything else. I might have been told he's got some new stuff going on, but I wasn't really tuned. I was more into Steve Gadd and Peter Erskine and the drummer, what I'm saying? Those are my heroes. So I thought, okay. So he puts, gives us all like these Musser 2-step mallets, which were like the fiberglass versions of rattan they used to sell. And he almost got to get a couple of those to use. And they had at the time, they used to put out these things called Ludwig educational packets. And in the packets were different like little handouts from various artists, from, snare drum stuff by some guy from DCI to like an orchestral guy talking about cymbal crashes to like Lee Stevens. Here's some, I think it was like a first 3 or so pages of Method of Movement, his book. So he passes it out, which has pictures with the hand positions and stuff like that. And he says, I'm going to show you how to hold the mallet. So, and he says, I'm going to show you how to hold my 4-mallet grip. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it's good that I'm here because I forgot, because I thought, well, this is good. Maybe this is a good thing that I came to this because now I got that piece I got to learn. And so, but I didn't know that it was like, I don't think I put together, maybe I did, or I don't remember if I put together that it was like a different thing that my teacher had showed me. I just thought, okay. And he showed us, it was a room of probably 25 people. I don't know who was in the room. And I like put them in my hands. Okay. And when you're younger like that, a lot of the older, I'm not say older because now I'm in my 60s now, older to me is a relative word, but the teachers or whatever the educators that were there were, I think percussionists were like, probably like, man, this is tricky, whatever. I was like, okay, whatever, who cares? Put it in, I got it. Because you don't think it's hard. You're like, okay.
Right.
Because I don't know anything else. I didn't have another system. And it was like, so I went home with that handout and I learned William Kraft with the Stevens technique. Right. I did. I didn't play the marimba with it at all. I just like, here, this piece. And it worked. It was like, even like the middle, like you get the rolls, you get these attacks on the outside drums. It was like, it worked, when they were attack like double stops on drums and roll on the inside drums. I used my fingers, and I think I was actually at the time kind of morphing what would have been a more traditional Musser technique in some ways, unintentionally, but just using my instincts. Go to my lesson, set it up, playing. I always remember this too, because the teacher, Herb, sometimes it was like Saturday morning, he would have breakfast. And this is something I do now. I'm teaching at noon. I'm eating. Students are like, I say, you want something, want some of this? You know what I'm saying? Like, no, it's okay. But, so I must have got that from her. But the thing is, you would have bacon. I remember this. You'd be like, oh, you'd be playing, you smell the bacon. You'd be like, man, I love this. It's like, man, God, I want to, it's a good. So, I always make my dad stop at Denny's on the way home or something. But anyways, I'm playing the multiple percussion thing for him. And he stops. What are you doing? I said, and I remember he was behind me. So I'm like, I turned back and I said, isn't this what, this is what I'm supposed to learn, right? This is the movement. Yeah, but how are you holding the sticks? I'm like, isn't this, I said, like you showed me, right? Is this similar? He goes, what are you doing? Show me. So I said this, he goes, are you doing the Stevens technique? I was like, yeah, I must be. I saw him do it a week ago. And I'm like, wow. And then he's like, show me. He goes, wow, that's great. So I said, just okay. He goes, yeah, do it. Go. Okay. So I did. And then later I learned like Yell Off to the Rain or something. But I didn't learn to play the technique. I first learned the technique on drums, which is interesting. I think it gave me a unique strength with it at the time. And I'm sure it was like if I had a video of my hands playing that technique now, I'd probably be like, oh God, there were probably a zillion things to adjust. But the rawness of it was there, and I learned it. I got a strength, and I did it. I played Merman. I went to Stout, and he was like, "Oh, this is great." I said, "Should I learn?" Because Stout held the mallets a little different, like a different, almost like a Burton kind of thing. And he said, "No, you should just stay with that. That's great. You're doing it great. Stay with that." Okay, which was great. I did it. So that was it. And that's how I learned. It's a really backdoor way, right? It's kind of funny, isn't it?
It is funny. Yeah.
Interesting. My dad made me go see Lee Harvey Stevens, so.
Lee Harvey Stevens, not to be confused with the other Lee Harvey.
Right. Not to exactly. Yeah.
It's great. So before we go, I just, to kind of circle back and talk about where we all started. Do you think, this amazing career you're still part of, you're still in the midst of, do you think a lot about legacy? Do you think about that very much? I know the last few years have been probably a little more challenging than others, and I imagine that perspective might be different now than it was 10 years ago.
Like I mentioned, I went through some stuff, which I'm fine. So it's great. I feel lucky. I'm totally healthy, as you can see. Here I am. I do whatever I want to do, which is amazing. All that stuff makes you reflect on life in general, right? You go through a traumatic health concern, and you can't help but be like, when you are pulled out of life and it stops and you look at what's going on and you feel like you're on the outside looking, like you're on the outside of it, looking at it, and I'm not the kind of guy that is ever on the outside. I'm like, I'm not, I don't sit still very well,
Mm-hmm.
So, it makes you think about a lot of things. Legacy. Yeah. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Only because I think it could be self-indulgent to think that way a little bit, to be honest with you. And I'm not like I'm not like above being self-indulgent, I'm going to have a peanut butter milkshake right now. But I just mean it like, I think also but I reflect on how thankful I am and how proud I am. Like I mentioned earlier of what all of them, I could make a list here of like, but I can't believe when I make a list of what I recently had to make a list of, students and what they're doing and over the years, and it was just and I think once you get old enough you have a lot of students, but I'm really proud of how I think they've become. I tell them too. I remember once at a PASIC, my group was playing at PASIC. I think it was in the early 2000s. It was a Northwestern group. Dietz was in the group, and Nissly and Skidmore, Jake, David, right? He's in third.
Mm-hmm.
I think Peter Martin was in the group. Matt Coley, if you know Matt Coley, in the group. Guy named Chris Keaton was in the group. He's a great player. Plays in one of the he plays in our Pershing Zone or something in New York. Army Field Band in DC. Great player. I'm sure I can mention Andy Stevens was in the group. Will James was in the group. Principal in St. Louis, right? It's a good group. They were kids.
Yeah.
And those guys were undergrads. Martin was a master's student. Anyways, Clay Condon, if you know that name, he wrote the early member of Third Coast who wrote some cool pieces, Fractalia and stuff. But they were students. And I stood backstage, and I remember this, and I don't know how they come up with this. I don't know, but I came up with this thing. I always like to give a little pep talk before, just a way to center us in before we go out and do a big concert, and also to reflect on the moment. I said, remember this, you won't forget this, but look around who you're playing with right now. I said, because I believe from the DNA deep in me that you're all leaders, and someday you're going to make really big impacts in the field. And I would point, and I think Nissly and Skidmore weren't even in a group. I had them there. They were sophomores. I had them there to help us set up. It was like, here, move this over here. But they were there. They were great troopers, but they were there. And I said, these guys, you're going to be principal in this orchestra someday. You're going to be teaching at this school someday. You're going to be like winning this competition. I just was randomly saying, bah, 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 bah. And some of them would come back to me like, man, you knew. I said, I knew. I was like, but you kind of know, because you know that you have some really great people that are motivated, that are gifted, that have the right mindset. And then you're really super proud to do that. And my wife, who always said to me, because, when you're a musician, I'm sure like you probably felt this. I don't know where you're at now with your own career and stuff, but like, when you do what I do, you think a lot about your performance and how you're playing and all that kind of stuff, especially when you're younger, because you're trying to make your mark and you feel like but she said, you think about that a lot, and that's great. But your legacy is going to be your students and your music. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. I was like, that's fine. It's like, I hate when I have to tell her she's right. It's just not, so, I know that she's right. And I think, my music, whatever that ends up being, I'm not going to speak to that. I don't know, but, and it's nice to see that people play the music and they play pieces that I've written a long time ago that they still play, which is rewarding and satisfying. But the student thing is the thing that I, feel the most proud of and thankful for, that I was able to have some part in helping them, or I just we shared a part of life together, and I was part of their path, and that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing. And, I think I'm most proud, not of their accomplishment, but of the relationships that we still have. Of course I'm very proud of their accomplishments, but I'm also more like happy. I want them to be happy. I want them to be, feeling like they're doing what makes them happy, which fills them up. That makes me happy more than like the merits of what that accomplishment is viewed at through our society. It's more their happiness, and mostly that they're people that, many of them, like all the guys you mentioned and more, we're still in touch on a regular basis, and we still have a meaningful relationship. That really is that's a powerful thing to me. That's a thing for me that. I never imagined. You can't imagine that when you're younger, and it's still hard for me to even get in my head. But it's special, and it's a big fortunate blessing that I get to have, and I'm thankful for it. So
yeah. Well, Michael, thank you for what you've done for the percussion community, for pushing the art form forward, and just thanks for spending some time with me today.
Oh, man,
I've really had a fun time.
Thanks for having me on. I don't know what I've done, but the art form sort of pushed me. So, I'm thankful to be a part of it. And it's it's fun to be part of percussion, because it's like we get to push something that is still growing, which is kind of fun to be on that train, super cool for all of us, so. Absolutely. And keep doing what you're doing, man. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to checking out the other podcasts and stuff,
Awesome.
Say hi to your son for me too, please. Okay.
I certainly will.
All right, man. Cheers, huh?
If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to the Bandwich Tapes wherever you listen, and consider leaving a rating or review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.